First off, I want to manage some expectations. I will not be rapping at all during this presentation. So I will be talking about our master plan, though, and the approach we've taken. We're about 2/3 of the way through the plan, so we're in the process of doing it. And just by a quick show of hands, does anybody else have a current master plan you're working on? So quite a few people, okay. Anybody who's finished one in the last 2 years? Couple? 5 years? More than 10 years? So quite a few. It is common. It takes a while to get people motivated around updating these plans. There are a lot of work involved with them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, why we needed a new plan, our process, some of the deliverables that we're getting from our plan. I'm going to talk a little bit about the development history of our campus, and then some core ideas that have already come out of the plan that we're now in the synthesis stage working on, how we engaged our consultant, and the timeline that we're working on. So, first off, aligning the strategy and the physical environment. So one of the challenges we have, when I started, as soon as our last master plan was done in 2008. I came on board almost 5 years ago, and our president said, "We need you to update the master plan because it's old." And I said, "Great, when was the last time we updated the strategic plan?" "Well, we haven't." "Well, then we can't update the master plan, because the master plan is the physical manifestation of our strategies. It's how we're going to execute the larger strategies within the university. So if we do the master plan first, we're kind of the tail wagging the dog. Everybody has all these things they want to do, and you wind up with a lot of pretty pictures and not a process to actually execute those. So it helps when we're doing capital forecasting and planning to be able to align back with our strategies. So why did we need a new plan? Like I said, so our last one was done in 2008. We had basically doubled our square footage since 2008 in some areas, like medical center in particular was really growing fast. We had a new strategy now we had to try to align with, and we wanted to focus our physical infrastructure towards our future. And no comments, about the old plan. I don't want to be negative about it, but one of the challenges with the old plan, you want a plan that's both aspirational and actionable. This plan was really aspirational, but it would have been very difficult to execute it. When you looked at all the boxes they put on a piece of paper and you added them up, there was easily over $3 billion worth of projects there. There really was no way to do those. There wasn't a good plan for that. And you want to be future looking, so you want to look at that. You want to look out 10, 20, 30 years in the future. And that's a challenge for a lot of leaders to look at. I mean, we have our leadership team that says, we don't know what enrollment's going to look like a year from now. Research is changing. We don't know about funding. How am I supposed to tell you not only what we're going to do in 2 years, how am I going to tell you what we want to do in 20 years? And I always try to remind them, we don't just plan to tell us what we should do tomorrow. We also plan to tell us what we shouldn't do today. What mistakes, if we make today, are going to prevent us from realizing those long-term strategies we're trying to achieve? And I'm pleased to say, even during this process, at one of our recent meetings with our executive steering committee, the CFO from our medical center turned to me and said he had been proposing this new dental clinic in a leased space and was a $30 million project, and the light bulb went on and said, "But if we put it there, it won't be near our new dental school where we need it to be in the long term." I said, "Exactly. That's the reason we don't do it. We want to put it where it's supposed to be today, even though the dental school isn't going to happen for years to come. At least the supporting facilities will be near each other, and the entire plan will make sense together." So part of the process, one of the first things we did is we started with our executive leadership team, and this is 4 people. This is our president, our provost, our EVP, and the CEO of our medical center. So we're a little bit unique at Rochester, where the medical center still reports up through the university. So we have dual responsibilities overseeing both, and we share a campus. So we had that group involved. And from there, they selected the executive steering committee, which is a 10-member team that's represented by deans and leadership across the board. 9 of the 10 members are cabinet members as well. So that's the team. The one thing I have found within higher education, which is a little different than a lot of my careers in healthcare doing master planning, everybody wants to be involved in the master plan. We do not have a shortage of people who have an opinion about what our campus should look like and what we should be doing. So how do you manage that? So then below that is that community at large, and how we have an advisory group of about 50 people, and then we have a lot of different workshops, and I'll share a little of the different ways we've reached out. And then, you know, like most of you, your master plan leads to your institutional zoning plan that you have filed with the city. Our main campus is actually across two cities. So we have the Erie Canal that separates the center of our campus. Everything north of the canal is within the city of Rochester. Everything south of the canal is in the town of Brighton. So we have to please both of them as part of this. So we've been working through that with them. So what are some of the things that included in the scope? Our academic and research spaces, our housing. We did a separate student housing study, our clinical facilities that are on campus, transportation and parking. We have a whole separate transportation plan. So we have a lot of parking on campus today. How do we, if you know, put a building there, we have to build structured parking to replace it. That makes sense, but unlike, you know, a shopping mall where people are coming all day long, mainly our parking serves our medical center that has shift changes. So, you know, twice a day, we're overwhelming the roads when people are coming and going from work. So we need to have planned for that a little bit better. So we put that in, and then we wove in our sustainability initiatives as well. We're looking at key buildings. We're not going to look at every building on campus. We have almost 200 buildings, but what are some key buildings that we want to look at and decide, should we renovate this building? Should we tear it down? Should it be modernized? Could it be used for a different purpose? And going through and picking the key ones we want to look at. And then, you know, again, it needs to be actionable. So really looking at what are the costs to it. As all of you know, when you do a major project, you probably have to do 10 enabling projects before you could start the major project. So making sure we're accounting for that. In our old plan, as an example, we had these buildings that ran along the road where our public utility has high voltage lines, and nobody had reached out to the utility to talk about, can these lines be buried? Can they be relocated? So we've engaged the utility early on to try to look at that, to make the plan actionable. So our selection process for the consultants, this was a little bit different. So, and I think this is one that I would share if you get a chance to try to look at doing something similar. Normally for a selection process, we would go out and we would send an RFP to 12 or 15 firms. We would take 3 or 4 of them, bring them on campus for an interview, spend an hour with them, and then based on that hour time, decide who we're going to spend the next 15 to 18 months with. And we didn't want to do that, so we did an RFQ instead. We did a request for qualification, and then from there, we hired the top 4. Now, what I would do different is I would only hire 3 going forward. 4 was just too much because it's too big of a time commitment. What we did with each of them, we paid them each a $50,000 stipend. And we asked them to come on campus. We gave them each 2 days on campus where they could walk around campus. They could do a charrette with our leadership team, whatever they wanted. They came up with their scope. And then they had 30 days to come back and present their approach to us and their proposal for the project. And we hired them, we paid them the small stipend for 2 reasons. One, we wanted to make sure they put a full effort in for this, and we wanted them to really try and do that. And second, we knew even the 3 we weren't going to hire were going to have some good ideas, and we wanted to make sure we owned those ideas, which we did. So even the ones we didn't hire, we wound up with. And it was interesting because through the 4 charrettes that we did with them, there were certain ideas that came up with every one of them that really helped us move forward the planning process a little bit. So in terms of deliverables, we've got a bunch of different things coming out of this. We've got our framework plan. We're updating our design guidelines. We have our infrastructure plan. We have the preservation reuse, capital project costs, I mean, like I talked about, all the different things. We did look at GIS land surveys. We're using those as an update. We didn't have good data on some of that stuff. The other interesting one was signage and branding. And I'll give you an example. In our south portion of the campus, we have a laboratory for laser energetics. It's the largest fusion research center in the United States. We do hundreds of millions of dollars of research around energy there with Department of Energy. We do some Department of Defense stuff. It's a really phenomenal facility, and we just did an addition to it. And I was there, and we had a board member and the president come up to me at the ribbon cutting and say, "It's a great building, it's beautiful, but it doesn't say University of Rochester anywhere on it." And I said, "Okay, so is the problem," I said, "typically we don't put signs on our buildings on campus. So is the problem that we don't have a sign on the building, or is the problem that people don't know they're on campus?" And we don't have any entry points to our campus that tell you you're entering the University of Rochester. When you're on our old historic campus, it's obvious you're on campus. But our total campus is almost 2 miles long. So it's a long rectangle. So parts of it, when you get to the south, you don't know you're on campus. So a little bit of the history on the campus. I'm only going to take a few minutes on this, but I would encourage, if you're doing this, when I presented to our board the first time and got people excited, I took them way back on the history. And it was something they really enjoyed, they got involved in, and they wanted to see where we came from. And it's important to talk about that because it starts to set expectations of what a plan is and what a plan isn't. So first off, I like to remind them this is a plan. It's not a contract, it's not a commitment, it's something that will evolve over time. It's what we think is best based on the information we have available today. It's not something that's an absolute. And when they see some of the old plans, it helps because they see these are the things we did, these are the things we didn't do. We took part of it and it evolved from there. So our campus, the university was founded in 1850 in a small campus downtown. The oldest plan we could find is from 1905 on that campus. And it showed how we were developing it, and some of the things we did, some of the things we didn't. This is what it looked like. There was 25 acres in the center of our downtown. Several of those buildings still exist today. The Art Gallery and the Cutler Union we own. That is our downtown Memorial Art Gallery. We've since moved off this campus years ago. Also, we have another campus in downtown, which is our Eastman School of Music. One of the top 5 schools of music in the world. George Eastman from Eastman Kodak funded it, created the campus. It's a beautiful building, but it's really isolated and separated from the rest of the campus. So that's one of the things we're working on, is not moving this from being the Eastman campus to being the University of Rochester downtown campus, and really focusing that and bringing some of our professional programs like our business school and our education to do evening programs down there in spaces that are underutilized. So in the 1920s, so any golfers out there? So Oak Hill Country Club is in Rochester, hosted 12 majors, the PGA 2 years ago, great course. Our campus is built on the original Oak Hill Country Club. George Eastman purchased the land that the country club moved to and gave us the land that they're on to build our campus. So it's pretty spectacular. They built the medical center first, though. So the medical school, the College of Nursing, and the original hospital were built in the 20s, along with the central plant, and that one building in front of the plant is our public utility, which now sits in the middle of our campus that was supposed to be on the outskirts of it 100 years ago. But we've worked around that. We have a series of tunnels that comes out of the plant to serve both the medical campus and the university campus. So part of it is thinking about your growth and looking at this. So this was our plan in 1930 when we started to build the academic side of it. And it was for 1,000 students and what we would look like. And pretty much that's exactly what they built. So this was, Charles Platt was the lead architect on this. Frederick Olmsted Jr. was our landscape architect. Frederick Olmsted Sr. designed Genesee Valley Park, which is adjacent to our campus. So we really wanted to play off the park that was there and part of it. So this was the two campuses combined then around 1935. I think one of the interesting things, we had the Lehigh Valley rail line that ran right through the center of campus. That's since been abandoned. That is one of our main campus roads. It's our north-south spine. and it's really something that's been underutilized and something that our new plan is focusing on how do we better develop along that spine. So then looked at, well, what if we had 2,500 students, what would it look like? What if we had 4,000 students, undergrads on campus, residential, what would it look like? Apparently we were going to be a Division I football program with the Horseshoe Stadium. That never happened. But a lot of the other things did come to fruition and did grow through. But then I took him to, in 1964, so 60 years ago, this starts to show what our modern campus really did evolve to. It had some of the big ideas like putting an interfaith chapel right on the river. We did do that project. It had a new student center, which was an IMP design. We did do that project as well. It had a parking structure, which we didn't do. So I have to keep reminding them for 60 years we've been promising more parking and we still don't do it. But we're going to work through that as we get to the next phases of it. So what does our campus look like today? About 736 acres, almost 200 buildings, about 13 million square feet of owned space, and then about another almost 2 million of lease space that we have around campus. So some of the big ideas that came out of this process. An innovation district. We have that piece where our medical campus and our academic campuses meet. And that's really a great opportunity for interdisciplinary research. We were one of the universities at the forefront of doing research for the COVID vaccine because we had been doing RNA research with Pfizer for the last 30 years. Pfizer would potentially like a space on our campus to do more work. We don't have any. So that space, though, between where our engineering school essentially sits and our medical school, which is a parking lot today, is really a potential for an innovation district. We talk about that transportation spine. That's the blue line right in the middle. That's reusing that old rail line. It even goes further to the south all the way because it had bridges that cross the Erie Canal and the highway. There's no way we could either get probably permission or afford to build those today, but we don't even use them. So they're an asset on campus that we want to try to reutilize. Our health science quad, that's where we talked about where the dental school will relocate to, behind our College of Nursing, next to our medical school, where we're going to add an allied health school and really put all of our health science education in one location with some green space around it. Better connections to the river. We're right on the Genesee River, but we turn our back to the river. Most of our buildings weren't designed to take advantage of the fact that we're on the riverfront. And then we would need to bring in some of that parking lot and turn it into buildings and increase our density. So I think this is how do we involve all these people in the community? And I think this is an interesting thing. The late Senator Daniel Pack Moynihan, this is a great quote. Those of you who've done urban planning, it's talked about in a lot of times. He said, you know, if you want to build a great city, build a great university and wait 200 years. And he clearly said that tongue-in-cheek, but there's a lot of truth to it, right? If you think of any great city in the world, there's a great university there. And when you think of the great universities, they embody part of the city that they're in. So how do they work together? And I thought this was interesting. Earlier this year, Forbes magazine published the top 25 cities in the country for quality of life. Anybody see a common denominator between those top three? They're all major university towns. Colleges enhance the towns that we're in. And I think it's important because we're all under pressure from the cities we're in because we don't pay enough taxes, right? They want us to pay pilots. They want us to do something else. I think we need to be able to remind them. And I think, you know, I was clear. I think I can tell you without any shadow of a doubt, but for the University of Rochester, the city of Rochester would not be in the top 10 on this list. So how do you continually remind people of that and work together? So again, we had to involve a lot of people. We did stakeholder engagements. We talked to over 2,000 students, almost 6,000 staff, almost 900 faculty, other community members, almost 400 of them. Again, we did separate studies. We did a dining study, a housing study that were part of this. They were all precursors to the master plan. They're all feeding information into the planning effort right now. They're part of the data analysis that we did on the front end. So we worked through all of that. The one piece we were missing was alumni. It came up. So we hosted it, we call Meliora Weekend. It's our homecoming weekend. We put some tents up in, we have Meliora Village. It's a beer garden, so people like to go there. And a lot of people came by our tent. I think part of that was it was raining and we had a tent, but I'm going to say they were really interested in what we were doing, and they showed up. And we did get some really good feedback. So, timeline, we're about 60% of the way through this, as I said. We've gone through the data analysis phase. We've gone through the scenario planning. We're now in synthesis, which is really putting feasibilities behind those ideas. Which ones really pencil out, which ones make sense and should be done, which are strategic, and then next will be the document stage where we'll present to the board. So with that, I want to stop because there's a few minutes left and see if anybody had any questions.
Great presentation, by the way. Just curious, how much did you invest on this front end to actually build the plan?
So the plan itself, our total cost is about $2.5 million of all the consultants, all the studies, the different pieces that we're doing, some facility condition assessments as we dig into the buildings a little bit more. So that does not count all the time, obviously, that people have put in the internal staff.
Just a quick question. I'm from a much smaller campus, obviously, but how granular did you get with your data analysis and data collection levels of engagement? Just curious how, obviously you had different sectors that you spoke to, but did you get down to like classroom needs or was it
We reviewed registrar data. We reviewed, again, those surveys that engaged the 2,000 students. We asked them about their day in the life, and they put on a map. They did a co-map, showed us where they go, where they're in. Some of the data I questioned, but some of it was pretty obvious. They're like, well, these are your two most popular areas on campus. Look at all the traffic. I'm like, those are in front of the dining halls. Of course they are. I mean, so if we move the dining hall, we move the traffic pattern. So some of it was good, but I think the more data you have, the better. But with all data, some is good, some's not.
To what extent was work from home, learn from home impactful in your planning?
So, that's a great question. It's one we're still struggling with and dealing with a little bit. There are certain groups, IT is gone. They're not coming back. So we did free up some space with them. I think, though, part of the challenge we have is we've moved to a lot of hybrid workforce, and nobody's managing it. So everybody gets to decide on their own how they want to set up a hybrid workforce. And what happens? If you tell people they have to come to the office 3 days a week, which 3 days are they coming? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? Yep. Nobody's coming in Monday or Friday. So we have some that come in 1 day a week. They're all there on Wednesday. What that does, though, from our standpoint, is you still have to plan for that maximum use. So we have a lot more unused space because we're not managing it properly. That's something we really have to get a hold of going forward if we're going to have this hybrid workforce, is really trying to get people to use it different days of the week. So we're not building for maximum use.
Okay, last question.
Hey, Mike, I had a question for you. Are you a degreed engineer?
I'm not a degree. I have a degree in engineering, but I'm not a PE.
But you're a degreed engineer.
Yes.
So I was in the same position you were. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to know is what prepared you to be able, as an engineer who doesn't like making eye contact and talking to drawings, and actually getting out of that shell to be able to really get, and I saw how many people you talked to, and I bet you talked to a lot of them yourself. What prepared you to do that? What skill set did you have to develop in order to be successful in this?
It's good. It is true. It's a little bit different. I have a couple people who work for me. Alan and I joke. I have one person who is the stereotypical engineer that we can't get out of his shell sometimes, and he takes everything literally that when we talk to him. So it is a challenge. Honestly, I think I went into college. I actually went into school. I was an athlete. I wrestled Division I. I didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. It took me 3 years. I was undecided before I declared a major, and I went into it. But it was one class in particular that really resonated with me, and it wasn't, they said, we're going to teach you one skill here that you're going to use the rest of your career. I said, what's that? I thought this would be great. It's just how to solve problems. All we're doing is solving problems. Every one of us, every day. Somebody brings us a different problem, and it's how we look at it and how we solve it. And that's something I'm really passionate about, I enjoy, And I think that's where it's kind of developed from. So, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.